Where the spirit of 1.8 million West Virginians wills you to victory. Other places have pro teams, but in this state, the Mountaineers are a way of life.
When I competed and wore that number, I competed for the state and for the people, not just for the university.
Now, let's roll out the carpet and bring on the Mountaineers.
Pittsburgh's three.
Yes! Alexander. Robinson comes forward. It's a dunk right at his feet. Send it in, Joe. Butler into the lane, into traffic. It goes again. West Virginia has won its first Big East championship.
So long, Big Blue. Hello, Golden Blue. The West Virginia Mountaineers are going to the Final Four.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another live stream here on the Country Roads webcast channel here. July 2nd edition, WVU basketball finally coming out today, announcing the official basketball coaching staff for the upcoming season in its entirety. So told you guys once that broke, we wanted to give you guys a report on what that would be. So we're going to cover that here throughout this live stream. And then there's some WVU football roster and recruiting updates, which if you've been following along on the channel, you've probably seen in short form videos, but wanted to address some of those and other news topics, both basketball and football wise, going throughout. So going to talk about a multitude of things. We'll lead off with the coaching news momentarily, but before we get into that, want to encourage you guys, as always, drop your questions, comments, concerns in the chat there. Try and touch on as many of them as we can throughout the stream here. Got plenty of news topics to touch on throughout as well. So the one way to guarantee that your comment, question, or concern is addressed and pulled up on the screen here, of course, is to send it in as a super chat. There's the little $ there in the chat. If you want to send it that way, we will 100% catch up on all of those before the stream ends. But other than that, try and catch up on what comments and questions I can throughout the stream. But we'll get into the WVU basketball coaching news here to start things off. Let's dive in right away. The university's official announcement coming out earlier today. So we're going to go to the university's official site, of course, WVUsports.com, where that was broken, and kind of just read through the release there from Brian Messerly earlier today. West Virginia University interim head men's basketball coach Josh Eilert announced his staff for the 2023-2024 season effective today. Deshaun Butler, DeMar Johnson, Jordan McCabe, and Alex Ruoff will be assistant men's basketball coaches. So multiple former West Virginia Mountaineers that I'm sure we've all seen play in recent memory. Of course, Jordan McCabe being the most recent of those, the youngest to join this staff. And then you get Alex Ruoff and Deshaun Butler as well, who very famous Mountaineers. Of course, Deshaun leading us to the Final Four and an amazing run there as Big East champions, as you heard there in the intro here to the live stream there that we use on the CRW Hoops side of things. So excellent staff there for West Virginia, in my opinion. They're going a little bit younger, skewing a little bit younger as they were with the addition of DeMar Johnson last season, and then continuing that trend for this staff for Eilert with the additions of Jordan McCabe and Butler, as well as Ruoff being promoted to a full-time assistant as well. Keeping Jay Kuntz on staff as the director of personnel and recruiting. Trenton Michaels will be the director of men's basketball operations. Jared Courtston will be the video and scouting coordinator, and Tyler Chang will remain the athletic data statistician for men's basketball. So the one change, of course, is Ron Everhart moving from an assistant on the bench there to transition to the director of community relations and player outreach. So still kind of a staff position for him, but a little bit more on the outside than right there on the bench where he has been in past years. That's another change there for this staff. And then, of course, goes into detail a little bit about each one of these players. I mean, not players, but coaches that have joined the staff, with 3 of them being former players, as I mentioned earlier. And as far as Deshaun Butler, Josh Eilert states, "We are thrilled to welcome Deshaun back to Mountaineer basketball. He's a Mountaineer legend who is just a great human being. Deshaun has NBA connections and is such a personable guy. He will fit in our program extremely well." And then DeMar Johnson, of course, who was on the staff last season in his first year with the Mountaineers. Josh Eilert states, "DeMar also has tons of NBA and professional connections. He has great rapport with our guys, and he sees things differently with years of experience in professional basketball. He has great attention to detail, and we are fortunate to have him on our staff." And then continuing on to the next person, of course, the youngest in this group that I mentioned earlier, Jordan McCabe. Like Deshaun, we are elated, to have Jordan back with Mountaineer basketball. We're fortunate to have a former point guard on our staff. He will be able to develop our guards and help them with the vision of where we are going. He too is wonderful with people in creating and maintaining relationships. And then Alex Ruoff. Alex is a hard worker who brings tremendous energy every day. He has a ton of experience from competing professionally overseas and a tremendous basketball IQ. He truly knows how to be a professional on and off the court. And then talking a little bit about some of the other assistants that we detailed there. Everhart moves into his new role after serving as an assistant coach at WVU since the 2012-2013 season. Jake Kuntz continues in his role and has been a part of WVU men's basketball for the last 15 years. Michaels will assume a new title after spending last season as operations coordinator. Corsten and Chang remain in the current positions. Corsten joined in August 2012, while Chang began his 6th season and his 10th year overall. And Eiler just states in regards to those contributors there, "The rest of the staff is invaluable to our program. They work many hours behind the scenes and all make vital contributions to our team's success." So a little bit of a read through there of the official press release, as the coaching staff has now been announced for West Virginia basketball this upcoming season. We knew Josh Eilert was taking over as interim coach. We were just waiting to see who kind of the pieces were going to be there on the staff. And we now know that DeMar Johnson, of course, staying on. Then you add in Deshaun Butler and Jordan McCabe. Alex Ruoff stays in the mix. Ron Everhart moving into a new role. And then the kind of outside positions there, Jay Kuntz and otherwise still staying on board, of course, which is great news, as a lot of these players were big proponents of Jay Kuntz in addition to Josh Eilert. So there you have it, the WVU basketball coaching news, if you didn't know already. John Kelly, what's going on, man? Appreciate you coming in here. Let's go Mountaineers, he says. And he says, love Butler coming back as well as McCabe, as do I. I think this is a great staff that Josh Eilert has put together for this upcoming season. And hopefully it pays dividends and this team ends up being successful with this staff. WVU football going deep says, given the time of year and risk that it's only a 1-year gig, they may have had to go with the younger guys with almost no coaching experience at this level. Great point there as well, and that's something we've talked about with Eilert, no head coaching experience on his own. So, as far as where they're having to bring in guys, they couldn't really bring in the guys that they wanted necessarily as far as long-term guys at the head coaching position due to how late it was. That probably remains true for the assistants as well in this case, and just kind of had to bring in some guys that were familiar with the program. But I think it's a great opportunity for those guys, just as it is for Josh Eilert when you're talking about Jordan McCabe and Deshaun Butler coming in a little bit young, fresh, maybe bringing in some new blood to the program. It's not necessarily a bad thing, though, but I certainly agree, it's probably something they had to do at this point in time, is just get someone that was familiar with the program that would be willing to come in such short notice. Absolutely. I don't disagree with you there. WVU Football Going Deep, and everyone, be sure to check out the WVU Football Going Deep channel here on YouTube as well, putting out some great content. Just put out a really good video today on Chad Scott and the offense that I just got a chance to watch earlier. Really enjoyed that as well there, WVU Football Going Deep. So I appreciate you tuning in and chiming in, but I'm going to get to some more basketball topics here before we switch over to some football topics here later on in the stream, if I can pull up this tab here. Just bear with me momentarily. But this is certainly really great news for West Virginia. I think we've all been kind of worried bringing in Josh Eiler. We thought that would ease the transfers for West Virginia. Didn't really do that in the way that we thought it would, as we've seen, 2 or 3 players leave since then. Doesn't look like, we're going to get too many of those back, if any. We'll see how that goes moving forward. I know Okonkwo, I haven't heard anything about him coming back. Wagee and Toussaint, that's still up for grabs. We'll see, but there's a lot of programs that are interested in them. Of course, we did get Kirk Risa back. That's great. But for me, the thing that I've talked about here for West Virginia basketball, I think the key was keeping Kirk Risa, Raekwon Battle, and Jesse Edwards. Raekwon Battle, we reported on the last stream, came out and said he was staying with West Virginia. And then just today, we get the final confirmation. Jesse Edwards, indeed, not going anywhere, staying with the Mountaineers. And this is huge. I think this was the biggest transfer addition for West Virginia this offseason. You're talking about a guy that averaged nearly 15 points a game, led the ACC in blocks, top of the nation in blocks, near the top in rebounds, double-double guy. So huge addition for West Virginia. And I think especially with the reports that now Kirk Risa is coming back, these two together, I think, is going to be a really dynamic duo for West Virginia basketball. Kirk Risa led the Pac-12 in assists the past 2 seasons, and he's really good at throwing alley-oops, and Jesse Edwards is really good at getting them and making plays around the rim. So that's going to be great for West Virginia. And Jesse Edwards is also going to give the Mountaineers something they haven't had since probably, Sagaba Konate, and a great rim protector. And he's going to be awesome on the glass for the Mountaineers as well. I truly believe that this season. So for me, I didn't want to see any players leave the Mountaineers. Of course, I loved the roster we had put together, but after things were kind of going awry with everything that has happened throughout this offseason, I thought the major key was let's keep Raekwon Battle, Kirk Risa, and Jesse Edwards, because I think if you have those core 3 guys, you can kind of build around that. And West Virginia, with Josh Eiler here as the interim coach, has been able to do that. Kirk Risa exited the transfer portal and returned. Raekwon Battle came out and said he's staying with the Mountaineers. And then now we get the confirmation Jesse Edwards staying as well. As you see from Ethan Bach here in this report over on WVSportsNow.com, Jesse Edwards announcing on social media at Jesse Edwards _14 there on Twitter if you want to follow him if you don't already, Mountaineer Nation. But he says, going nowhere. Time to make this a special year. Let's go to work for this staff, this team, and this place. Let's go WV, and get the picture there with him and Josh Eiler. So that's awesome news for West Virginia basketball as well. Moving forward, I think this season still has great potential, keeping those core guys together that I think you can really build something around. And despite the fact that West Virginia has lost some guys, there's still, I think, over 500, I believe is what I saw earlier on WVSN, over 500 guys left in the transfer portal. We know West Virginia is in on, Paul McCahey from Rutgers, a 6'7" guard, trying to get his services, Alexa Yetna as well. And those are just the ones that we know West Virginia has contacted. There's been some really good players entered the portal in recent week or two as well. The guard from Alabama, Quiverly, I believe is his name. So who knows who West Virginia will get on in the future to add to this team. I believe they still have 3 or 4 spots left now, if none of the transfers that are in the portal return to the Mountaineers. So I think this roster still is shaping up to be a good one for West Virginia, despite the way that things have kind of been shaken the past couple of weeks or so, and not exactly being the roster that we expected it would be. But I think you're keeping a good core together, and hopefully it pays dividends this upcoming season, and West Virginia is able to compete within the Big 12 conference. But going to touch on some more basketball topics before we switch to football. Like I said, as always, encourage drop your questions, comments, concerns in the chat there. Try and touch on them some throughout here as much as possible. The one way to guarantee we pull it up there and on the screen and address it, of course, the foolproof way is send it as a super chat, and we really appreciate that. If you do that, helps keep things going here on the CRW, and that's the little $sign there in your comment box. But before I pull up the next topic here, I'm going to take a swig of my coffee and wet my whistle a little bit, throat's a little dry, and we'll get in on some more Mountaineer basketball topics, and then got some great WVU football roster and recruiting updates coming on later on in the stream as well. Oh, there we go. Much better. You guys know me and my coffee addiction here, of course, but I believe I have another basketball topic pulled up here that is probably of interest to you guys. It was of interest to me, of course. That's why I'm trying to share it here. That's always kind of the way it goes. But the Italy trip, the foreign trip that we knew West Virginia was going to take this offseason originally, I know that was kind of in question with everything that has gone on throughout this offseason. But indeed, with Josh Eiler's promotion, with securing the staff now in short order, as they needed to do to be able to make this still a possibility, West Virginia basketball will still be going on that trip to Italy here later this month. Actually is when it will start. As I'll scroll down here, Ethan Bach, of course, reporting this on WVSportsNow.com, where you guys should always be keeping up with all West Virginia sports news there. But WVU Hoops on Twitter, ciao Italy. We're headed to Italy to embark in our preseason summer tour, July 31st through August 10th. This team heading to Italy this offseason. And I think that will be a great bonding experience. And, we talked a little bit earlier and in the past about, Josh Eilert really needing to kind of cut his teeth, no head coaching experience. And the staff, of course, that we now know that West Virginia has brought in here is a little bit younger and maybe inexperienced as well. So I think this Italy trip will be great for those, to get kind of their feet wet in the coaching ranks. And then also you're bringing in a lot of new guys to this roster that we know of already. Mentioned, Kirk Reese, Raekwon Battle, and Jesse Edwards. And then, of course, you still got Jose Perez at this point, and then Omar Silverio. So a lot of transfers and new pieces in the mix for this roster, and who knows who you may add before you go there on that trip, July 31st, still in the next month. So it's going to be a lot of new pieces for West Virginia. So not only is it going to be good, I think, for the coaching staff to be able to kind of get their feet wet, cut their teeth a little bit on this foreign trip, see what they got and get used to kind of coaching this team. It's going to be really good for these new pieces as well, and good for team chemistry, team bonding, morale, all of those great things that help lead to success. You got to have great team chemistry if you want to have a successful season. And here in this new age of, college sports, where you're kind of building your team from year to year, especially in college basketball, that's even more so true than college football. And West Virginia really doing that this season and bringing in some big pieces. We know it's one of the top transfer portal classes in college basketball, has been rated that throughout the offseason. But either way, it's people that are not familiar with the program and also players that have not played together. So I think this trip here to Italy will be great for them to get a chance to kind of fill each other out and hopefully build some team chemistry ahead of even, starting practice in Morgantown before the season starts there later on in the fall. So glad to see that this trip is still going on. I thought that it would be vital for this team's success to still happen this season. So glad to see that it's still occurring, later this month through the beginning of August there. So I believe that's all I've got there basketball news-wise. We'll switch over, touch on some football topics. Not going to be here with you two guys too late, too long. I just definitely wanted to touch on this basketball staff and update it now that we know what it was looking like for this upcoming men's basketball season, because we wanted to continue to report on that as it progresses, throughout the offseason leading into this new era of Mountaineer men's basketball without Bob Huggins, with interim coaching Josh Eilert, and also going to want to continue to update it as, new pieces are added to the roster as well. So there'll be further live streams in the future where we talk more Mountaineer basketball. And then as the offseason progresses and we get closer to fall camp, there'll be more football topics as well. And I'm going to touch on some of those momentarily here. But I want to catch up on some comments here. See if we can get some of these in. Appreciate you guys that have tuned in here and chimed in here live with us. And if you are in here live, do us a favor, just take a second, pop out of the live chat, hit that little thumbs up button, give us a like on the video. It really helps its performance, helps it hit that YouTube algorithm, really helps the channel in the future, and everything, all those good things. And then if you're a West Virginia fan, be sure to subscribe to us here, continuing with West Virginia basketball and football updates, always here on the Country Roads webcast. So if if you're a Mountaineer fan, definitely going to want to be tuned in here. So subscribing is a great way to do that. So hit that subscribe button as well. But even if you're watching on the playback, hitting that like button will help us, and you can always subscribe to us at any time, continuing to try and grow this Country Roads webcast community throughout Mountaineer Nation. But Chase Long, appreciate you being in here, man. Don't think I've seen you in here before, so appreciate you hopping in and chiming in as well. He says, despite popular belief, I think that WVU basketball is going to be good. I do too. I think that there's been a lot of things that have come out, since this Bob Huggins stuff has happened and he's resigned and the guard has kind of changed, that you've seen some kind of media personalities talking about West Virginia's roster is not a top of the Big 12 roster. And I think that's crazy because, it's one of the top portal classes in college basketball. And to me, I think West Virginia certainly has a chance to compete within the Big 12 conference. And if you're competing to win the Big 12 conference, that's the best conference in college basketball, in my opinion. So you're certainly competing nationally. So I'm right there with you, Chase Long. I think, some people may be underrating this roster still yet. See if we got anything else in here. Anybody else in here coming in? Is the Alabama guard J.J. Quinterly's brother? I'm not 100% certain on that. I'm not 100% sure on that, Dwayne. But I just had looked on WVSportsNow.com. They've been doing like portal reports and stuff, and they had talked about, of course, the ones West Virginia's targeting that I mentioned earlier, Mulcahy and Yetna. And then they had some list of some talented players that have entered the portal, and I know that one was at the top and stood out to me. I don't know if they're related or not, though, but certainly would be a good addition either way, I think. But switch over here. Let's talk about some football topics before we get out of here before too much longer. I appreciate everybody that's tuning in here live. And as we continue, I encourage you guys, drop your questions, comments, concerns there in the chat. Try and touch on as many of them as possible as I continue throughout the stream. And just updating the WVU basketball coaching staff now that we know that it's completed. But I wanted to switch over. And, of course, there's plenty of football topics piling up as we continue throughout the offseason here, especially the WVU football recruiting class for 2024. Really been on a hot streak since the beginning of June, piling up commits to the point where it's nearly at the end of the completion of high school players that they're really going to sign. I've heard that they're going to sign probably, I guess not sign. You can't really say that till signing day, but I've heard that they're looking to bring in 20 high school commits. They're up to 17 now. So I want to talk a little bit about the West Virginia football recruiting class and share that with you guys. If you have been following along, I've been trying to update that as the verbal commitments have come in. And then, of course, roster-wise, been dropping those roster updates on the channel as well. But West Virginia's roster for the upcoming season nearly complete now with the latest transfer edition. We're just awaiting one more addition of a true freshman. And, of course, we know West Virginia has 2 scholarships remaining. Could add some late transfers there or maybe award a scholarship to some preferred walk-ons. But want to update the West Virginia roster and 2024 recruiting class for you guys that haven't had a chance to check that out. Maybe you can just check it out here live. So we'll do that here before we close out. But there are some other football topics I wanted to pull up that I thought were pertinent here. Wanted to talk about on this live stream. One of which is, of course, a West Virginia great that will be honored this upcoming season, and that is one of the all-time leaders in sacks, someone that, of course, we all had the pleasure of watching, I'm sure, and that's Bruce Irvin, and he's going to be inducted to the WVU Sports Hall of Fame this upcoming season, as you see here reported by Mike Ostie over on WVSportsNow.com. Bruce Irvin putting it out on Twitter at @BIrvin_WVU11. If you don't follow him yet, Mountaineer Nation, give him a follow there. But he says 2023 WVU Football Hall of Fame, been waiting on this. So awesome that he's getting inducted this upcoming season. Glad to hear that. Irvin, 35 years old, most recently returned to the Seattle Seahawks for a third stint with the NFL franchise who drafted him. Of course, played for the Mountaineers from 2010 to 2011. And in those couple of years, recorded 45 tackles and 22 and a half sacks across those 2 seasons at WVU, playing a key role on West Virginia's Orange Bowl winning team, as written there by Mike Ostie. And then, of course, went on to be the 15th overall pick in the 2012 NFL draft, one of the first-round picks that West Virginia has produced in the past decade or so. Has since played for the Raiders, Falcons, Panthers, and Bears, totaling 340 tackles and 54 sacks in the NFL, playing in 2 Super Bowls, winning one, of course, with the Seahawks. So glad to see him forever be enshrined in West Virginia sports lore there, as he will be inducted into the WVU Sports Hall of Fame this upcoming season, a member of the 2023 class. And then, of course, talking about the 2023 season, there was some other news in regards to Mountaineer football game promotions for the upcoming season. This, of course, is something that we should all be made aware of if you're going to be attending some West Virginia football games this season. As you see, are put out on the university's official Twitter account, the home opener, of course, against Duquesne will actually be Family Day as well. That's coming September 9th. As we know, West Virginia's first game of the season against Penn State will take place on the road. So the home opener against Duquesne going to be Family Day. And then you get a couple, home stretch there for the Mountaineers there, 3 straight home games in a row following that opener on the road against Penn State, with the next one being the one that we're all super excited about, the Spit Panthers coming into Morgantown, where we're going to get our revenge and finally beat those guys here this upcoming season. And that's going to be the Stripe to Stadium game there, September 16th at Mountaineer Field. And then the next week is going to be the Gold Rush game, where West Virginia hopefully will finally get on the winning side of things against Texas Tech. We know Neil Brown has yet to beat them here in his tenure at WVU, so hopefully that changes this upcoming season. And if so, we'll be in a Gold Rush game that will also be a Hall of Fame week there for the Mountaineers. And then in October, you go to October 21st, will be homecoming for West Virginia University, and the Mountaineers will take on the Oklahoma State Cowboys there in Morgantown there for homecoming. And then in November, you get 2 more promotions. November 4th, of course, is going to be Military Appreciation, Mountaineer Week, and they will be doing the True Blue game for that one, where the first time here, since they are conference opponents, BYU will come into Morgantown, as just effective yesterday, actually. I guess I should mention the new members of the Big 12 have officially joined effective July 1st. So the Big 12 now officially has 14 members, at least for, another few months or so, till Texas and Oklahoma head off to the SEC, and then we'll see what else happens expansion-wise. There are, of course, a ton of reports coming out that the Big 12 maybe add more teams for the future. We'll see what happens there. And then the final promotion that was announced, of course, is Senior Day. Final home game of the season for the Mountaineers will be November 18th, and that will be kind of the renewal of an old Big East rivalry, I guess you could say, is what the Cincinnati Bearcats will come into Morgantown. There's 2 of the 4 new teams. West Virginia will play all 4 of those new teams, the other 2 being on the road, West Virginia going to Houston and UCF. West Virginia, one of only 2 teams in the Big 12 that will play all 4 newcomers, and West Virginia gets BYU and Cincinnati at home, as you see there. So the game promotions, just to recap: September 9th, home opener and Family Day against Duquesne. September 16th, Stripe the Stadium against Spit. Gold Rush and Hall of Fame game, September 23rd against Texas Tech. October 21st will be homecoming against Oklahoma State. And then you get True Blue, Mountaineer Week, Military Appreciation against BYU. And then Senior Day, of course, to end the home slate against Cincinnati on November 18th. So there's a little bit of some football news, and we're going to get into some recruiting and roster updates here before we close out, before too much longer. But wet my whistle one more time with some coffee, and then I'll catch up on some comments, and we'll get into those roster and recruiting updates. All right. So let me catch up on some comments here, and then dive in on those recruiting and roster updates before we close out here before too much longer. But appreciate everyone that's tuned in here live to this July 2nd CRW live stream. kind of updating the WVU basketball coaching staff now that it's completed. And of course, touching on some WVU sports news updates. Going to try and continue this throughout the off season as we approach the start of both sports. Try and do this at least once a week as much as possible. Just updating, WVU sports news topics that we haven't had a chance to touch on since the prior live stream, and get some of your all's thoughts on some of those that have come out. So be sure to drop your thoughts in the comments on the West Virginia coaching staff or any of these news topics we're talking about throughout. I'm going to try and touch on some of them now, and I'll try and touch on them one more time before we close out here. And of course, like I said, the one guaranteed way that I can pull yours up on the screen here and address it is send it as a super chat, and we really appreciate those as well. They kind of help things continue to go here on the CRW. But looking at some of these comments here, WV Football Going Deep says some are saying West Virginia may take 22 to 23 football commitments. Interesting. Glad to hear you point that out. Appreciate that, WV Football Going Deep. I'm excuse me, I'm surprised even that they would go as far as 20, because just as the way the transfer portal era is now, it almost seemed like to me the sweet spot was like 16 to 19 and leave you some spots for transfer portal additions. But we've also heard Neil Brown and company talk about how they really want to build this through high school players for the future. So maybe they're really trying to swing it that way and hope these guys continue to stay with the program. But unfortunately, that's a gamble in today's day and age. But I would certainly love to see them add 22 to 23 commitments. And I definitely think they can do that. They're in on a lot more than what we've seen already commit. And there's some more, coming down the line. So I'm very excited about this class. I think that it's going a little bit unheralded. I've seen people, talk a lot about the star rating. And I know you've talked about that in the past on your channel as well, WVU Football Going Deep, that star ratings completely arbitrary, really. And so I think a lot of these players, if you watch their film, if you look at their ratings within their states, within their position group, and, nationally, West Virginia is really doing a great job yet again with this 2024 class. And that's one thing you can't really knock this coaching staff about since they've came in, is they've done a great job recruiting. I think if you look right now among the new Big 12 for these 2024 classes, West Virginia is currently second in the Big 12. And I believe they have the most commits of anyone in the Big 12. So West Virginia really doing a great job on the recruiting trail, reeling in these verbal commitments. Hopefully the majority of them stick, come signing day in December, and we'll continue to update them as more come in. And once signing day gets there, do a signing day recap where hopefully we land all of these guys. But I wouldn't be mad to see us land 22 to 23. John Kelly says happy for Bruce, as am I, man. That's great. Just couldn't be anyone more deserving. I know he's donated a ton of money to the program in the past and to the university as well. So since he came to West Virginia, it seems like he's been really grateful for what the program did for him, for his life, producing him to be a first-round draft pick. And he's really, brought that back and fed that back into the university tenfold. So he's certainly deserving of being a Hall of Famer here at WVU. WVU Football Going Deep says with Samaj Jones committing to Cincy a few years from now, we could see a showdown between Samaj Jones and Khalil Wilkins. Yeah, definitely. That's going to be awesome if that does pan out in the future, and both those guys are the quarterbacks of the future of each of their respective programs. Of course, we reported on Khalil Wilkins in the past here on live streams, and of course an individual video like we have with most of the verbal commitments in this 2024 class upcoming for West Virginia. And Khalil Wilkins really impressed this coaching staff when he came on a visit and came for a camp, to the point where they kind of leapfrogged him over Samaj Jones, took his commitment right away. And then Samaj Jones today actually announcing his commitment to Cincinnati. I guess it was about an hour and a half ago now that he announced that. And I'm sure most of us throughout West Virginia kind of expected that he wasn't going to commit to the Mountaineers after Khalil Wilkins' addition, but, tried to, keep things still hopeful. I'm always one of those guys that even if it's a 1 in a million chance, you got to keep that up. I'm always a big fan of that Dumb and Dumber meme, so you're telling me there's a chance. And West Virginia certainly did have a chance at Samaj Jones being in his final, 3 or 4 there. But of course, with West Virginia bringing in Khalil Wilkins, Samaj Jones decides to commit to Cincinnati today. And that, of course, is a conference foe now. As I mentioned earlier, all the new 4 additions now officially in the Big 12 effective yesterday. So Cincinnati and West Virginia are going to be competing in this conference throughout the near future. And within that, next couple of years or so, who knows if Khalil Wilkins could be starting for the Mountaineers and Samaj Jones for the Bearcats. And it's going to be interesting as, West Virginia was in on Samaj Jones as well. So it's going to be fun to watch those guys go head to head if that does pan out. Appreciate you pointing that out, WVU football going deep, and wanted to touch on that as well. What's going on, Kenny? Appreciate you, man, coming in as always. Kenny says he's so tired of the Pac-12 drama dragging their feet. Excuse me. It's getting old. Yeah, I know, man. It's like, I don't keep up with it enough to know exactly what's going on, but from the little that I do know, it was almost like July 1st was initially the date that everyone said we may hear something on expansion one way or another, because the Pac-12 TV deal was kind of what's going to drive this thing, because a lot of people are expecting it's not going to be near what the Big 12 got. And it may even be, a lot of streaming only and not a lot of, on cable television, national TV that's not just on streaming. And so a lot of people are expecting, some of those Pac-12 schools are not going to like that, are going to decide to bolt. Kind of the way that I've gathered it, layman's terms, I guess. Like I said, I don't know a ton about it. I don't really keep up with it. But I know one date everyone had said was July 1st. We may hear some news about that. The only news that really came out was that San Diego State had previously, earlier in the month of June, said they were going to leave the Mountain West Conference, and kind of their deadline to do that was July 1st because their buyout increased or doubled after July 1st. They actually decided to stay in the Mountain West Conference. They announced that. So that's the only domino that fell on July 1st. We're still waiting to hear more about the Pac-12 TV deal. And I think that the next deadline I've heard is hopefully by the end of July, we'll know what's going on with the Pac-12 and then know more about conference realignment in the near future. But the one good thing is that I think West Virginia is in a conference that should be solidly set within this Big 12. We know we got 12 members locked in for the near future. Of course, Texas and Oklahoma leaving this season, dropping it to 12. But if any of those Pac-12 teams, decide to leave that conference, at least a couple of them, I'm sure, are going to come to the Big 12 as well. So West Virginia is in great position for, the future of college football to still be in play within, the power conference scheme of things that you really need to be a part of in terms of if you want to be considered for, major bowl games, college football playoff, etc. So that's the good news. But like, I'm right there with you, Kenny. I just wish we would know something one way or the other. If some teams are going to leave the Pac-12, if they're going to stay there, this conference realignment stuff, it's very fluid right now. And everyone seems like they're kind of unsure of where their conference is headed. So I'm right there with you. I'd like to know something definitive one way or the other. But BJ, what's going on, man? Appreciate you as always. Says, let's go Mountaineers. Indeed. That's always the motto, man. Appreciate you tuning in and chiming in. The Hooper Cooper, man. Don't think I've seen you in here before. Appreciate you coming in here. He says, I want Hugs back. If they don't bring him back, Hugs for governor. I know. I see that going around. Hey, man, if Hugs ran, I would not be surprised if he won. And people would vote for Hugs for governor. Indeed. But, I know a lot of people would love to see Huggins come back. They're talking about maybe he could be a factor in, the upcoming coaching search in the spring. As we know, Josh Eilert right now is interim. He may be considered, for the position, depending on what happens this upcoming season. But just my personal opinion, I don't think Huggins will ever be back, coaching at West Virginia. Whether he wants to coach basketball again or not, that's on him. I hope, he does what he needs to do in his own life and gets healthy, as, Ren Baker and others have stated. First and foremost, if he wants to get back into coaching basketball, I'm 100% sure there's a job out there for him. If, guys like Rick Pitino and others can get back into it, he certainly can. So I just don't think that West Virginia would be bringing him back. Now, with Gordon Gee's not the president or Ren Baker's not the athletic director, maybe a different, conversation. But the one good thing I'll say is that, Ren Baker did go out of his way to say they're not banning Huggins from the program by any means. And they do also want to find a way to honor him, hopefully even this upcoming season. So that's great to hear because, of course, he is somebody that, the state values and has a legacy throughout, the college basketball coaching world. And of course, here at West Virginia, one of the all-time winningest basketball coaches as well. So certainly should be honored, especially after his Hall of Fame induction last season. So I'm glad to hear that that's in the cards. But personally, I don't ever see him, coaching at West Virginia. But, stranger things have happened. I've been wrong before. I could be wrong again. But to me, it's just kind of, I think, going to be something that continues to come up. Kind of like since on the football side, since Rich Rod departed, everyone's talked about him possibly returning every year since 2010 when West Virginia was on their first coaching search since he left then. So I think it's going to be something that continues to come up on the basketball side here as well. If West Virginia's ever looking for a coach, his name will probably continue to pop up, but I don't see it happening, but you never know. But appreciate everyone that's in here live. I continue, drop your questions, comments, concerns there in the chat. Try and touch on some more of them here before we close out, before too much longer, but want to update the football, provide a couple football recruiting updates and a roster update as well. But we'll try and touch on some more of those comments before we close out, before too much longer. And like I said, the one sure way to make sure we address your question, comment, or concern is to send it as a super chat, and we'll pull it up on screen and read it and address it there. But appreciate everyone that's in here regardless. And one way to help us, if you can't send a super chat, you can always like the video and subscribe. Those things are free, and we appreciate those just as much here on the Country Roads webcast. But I'm going to pull up a couple of football recruiting updates and talk about those, and then we'll get into a roster update as well. But take one more swig of coffee here, wet my whistle, and then talk a little recruiting with you guys. All right, so before we get into some sure things, or I guess closer to sure things, it's never really a sure thing in today's day and age till they've signed that national letter of intent. But West Virginia has had several commits come in since we've had a chance to do a live stream in the past here on the Country Roads webcast, and we'll talk about those verbal commitments momentarily. But how about someone that could be a future verbal commitment, and it's someone in the trenches that could really help bolster this class to even higher ranks? We mentioned earlier, top 2 in the Big 12 right now, has more commits than anyone else in the conference here for the 2024 recruiting class. And this addition would really help to grow to an even higher rate, as you see a 4-star offensive line target has West Virginia within his top 5 favorites, sets his announcement date, and that is Ryan Howerton. He would be one of the biggest pieces and biggest additions to this class. 6'5", 305 pounds, 6'5", 305. Excuse me.
Today, Junior.
I got to throw that in there when I stutter like that. But West Virginia has commitments from a couple of offensive linemen already in this class. But Howerton, 6'5", 305 pounds, 4-star offensive tackle from the state of Maryland. We've talked about West Virginia doing a great job recruiting nearby states in this class. This will be a great addition coming from the state of Maryland. West Virginia already has a couple of great commits from the state of Maryland, including one 4-star already on board. That one's a defensive lineman, so it would be great to add another lineman that's a 4-star from that state, but on the opposite side of the ball in Howerton. And he will be announcing his commitment here in just about 2 weeks from today. As you see here, July 15th, top 5 finalists, Maryland, Spit, the Mountaineers, Buffalo, and Virginia Tech, their VPI, as his top 5 finalists. So hopefully West Virginia is able to lock down one of their top remaining targets left on the board. This would be an excellent addition for West Virginia's class that would really boost it a lot. And hope to see him pick the Mountaineers on July 15th. So be on the lookout for that coming up in the future. West Virginia, like I said, has a great class already, but that would certainly be an amazing addition to this class. And as this class goes, update you guys on how it stands currently. Like I said, tried to update this throughout the offseason as these commits have came in, tried to do a video here in short form on each one, but also tried to update it in live streams as we've gone throughout. Of course, since we've had a live stream last, we've had 4 more commits come in. I knew at least a couple of these were slated to commit to West Virginia, and I kind of mentioned that briefly in our previous live stream that I knew of a couple silent commits for West Virginia, and I even put it out there on our Twitter, which if you're not following us on social media, be sure and do that at WVU Country Roads on Twitter, Country Roads Webcast on Facebook and Instagram. But on our Twitter on June 30th, I put out, be on the lookout for a couple of, at least a couple of commitments to West Virginia over the next couple of days, because I knew that those were going to be announced on June 30th and July 1st. But within those days, since June 30th, West Virginia actually has brought in 4 new verbal commitments, 2 guys in the trenches there, and then you get another addition to the secondary, and then the first running back that West Virginia has added in this 2024 class. But just kind of in the order that they occurred: defensive lineman Mekhi Byerson, 6'5", 230-pound, 3-star recruit out of Virginia. And then you added a defensive back in Jason Cross, who's kind of listed as an athlete by some services, and he's super athletic, quarterback in high school, plays offense and defense, also plays basketball there in Pittsburgh. But West Virginia going, right there in the backyard of the backyard brawl, stealing one out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to get Jason Cross, who is projected to play safety at the college level, 6'2", 270-pound, 3-star recruit. And then just today, I put out videos on the 2 offensive additions West Virginia's added to this class. Be sure to check out that video if you haven't already. But those were offensive lineman Justin Terry, who has amazing size for a true freshman, 6'6", 300+ pound, 3-star recruit out of the state of Ohio. And then also out of the state of Ohio, like I said, West Virginia doing an awesome job recruiting those borderline states. Neil Brown, when he came in, they talked about him following a similar recruiting strategy to what Don Nehlen did. People that talked about Don Nehlen when he came into West Virginia, took a pencil, stuck it in Morgantown, and drew a 300-mile radius around and said, we can get a ton of guys in this radius throughout these borderline states. And Neil Brown is kind of taking that same strategy while also kind of trying to keep the pipeline in the South there in Florida and Georgia going as well. And then I've also talked about how much they've done a great job recruiting in-state, landing at least one of the top 2 recruits in state every single year since they've been at West Virginia. But speaking of those borderline states, you get the running back addition to this 2024 class out of one of those, also coming from Ohio, in Dior Hubbard, 5'11", 190-pound, 3-star guy. And West Virginia's done a great job finding really kind of diamonds in the rough, I guess you could call them, at the running back position in recent recruiting classes. You talk about C.J. Donaldson just last season, wasn't even a running back recruit. Of course, he was an athlete, but that was a diamond in the rough. And then a couple of years ago, you landed 2 4-stars in Justin Johnson and Jalen Anderson. And then if you're looking at this past year's recruiting class, I think the diamond in the rough, of course, to me was Jaheim White. I've sung his praises a ton here on the Country Roads Webcast channel. The great Jed Drenning himself even compared him to Steve Slayton on the signing day show when they were talking about the 2023 class. And we got to see it, for our own eyes in the Gold Blue spring game, in which he led the team in rushing. And I think he's going to play a part this season despite being a true freshman. So him and the other addition that West Virginia kind of added that flew under the radar just because of the place that he played at in Florida was not a very big school. Neil Brown and company talked about that his school, probably doesn't even show up on the map. If you look up the state of Florida, I believe it's called Port St. Lucie, but that's DJ Oliver. And DJ Oliver's of a similar build to C.J. Donaldson and Jalen Anderson, as he's, 230+ pounds. But I would argue that he's even got more speed than C.J. Donaldson and Jalen Anderson have. And, talking about those 2 aforementioned guys, Donaldson and Anderson, I think they're going to be the 2 featured backs this season. We all know about Donaldson, but Jalen Anderson's my, pick for breakout player of the year. I'm really high on that guy, as you guys have probably heard here in the past. So I think Dior Hubbard, the fact that, Chad Scott and this coaching staff went out, recognized him, and brought him into this class, and he's been high on West Virginia since they got in on him, early on, is a great sign, and I think he'll be a great piece for the future of West Virginia football, as a lot of these guys will. All talked about this class earlier, just kind of raving about how it's shaping up. 17 commits already. That's awesome. That's awesome. The most in the Big 12, and we still have more, coming in the near future. Hopefully Ryan Howerton, who we just talked about, decides to choose West Virginia. That'd be a 4-star offensive lineman addition. And West Virginia's, at this point shaping up to maybe have one of the best classes in the entire Big 12 in 2024. So want to provide a little West Virginia football recruiting update there. Certainly well deserved for how hard they've been hitting the recruiting trail over the past couple of months. It was just back in May, West Virginia had 2 or 3 commits. And then here we are, a month and a half, 2 months later, and West Virginia has 17 guys signed on, nearly getting close to closing out the 2024 class as far as high school commits are concerned. So really like the way that class is shaping up for 2024. I wanted to update you guys on that. And of course, this upcoming season, though, is just, a few short months away at this point. We're getting closer and closer to the start of fall camp. And that means we have a lot of the roster now on campus. I've been trying to update this throughout the offseason as roster additions have came in. As you've been following along, I'm sure here on the channel, you probably already know that and are familiar with this Google Doc in which I've been doing that. But I've also tried to, title them and date them as I've been trying to do that. So you can go back from the beginning and watch this roster, the way it's shaped up, piece by piece. Even if you want, just go to the WVU football roster update playlist here on the Country Roads webcast channel. But in the most recent roster update I just put out yesterday, I had to put out because West Virginia finally added, the last transfer edition that we already had signed on that we were awaiting. And that, of course, was Anthony Wilson, the transfer safety from Georgia Southern. And I will scroll down to where he is factoring in here, but I want to take time and scroll through this kind of slowly for some people that may not have got a chance to look at the West Virginia roster yet throughout this offseason as it's been built. And, this is something I do anyway, is just kind of keep track of the West Virginia roster. So I decided why not try and share it on the channel here throughout this offseason and try and do this, moving forward. The closer and closer we get to, fall camp, of course, some of these players will, move to different positions and further roster updates will be put out in that regard. But, you always hear a lot of people talk about, I don't even know who's on the team this season, especially now in the transfer era, NIL era. It can change so much from year to year. So I thought this would just be a great source for Mountaineer Nation to be able to keep up with who's on the roster, scholarship-wise anyway. That's the only caveat here, is I'm not including, preferred walk-ons on this roster just for brevity purposes and, of course, to make it easier on myself. This only includes scholarship players, so this will be, the 85 players that West Virginia ends up having on scholarship once fall camp comes around, which I believe is at 82 right now because we're still waiting one more addition from the high school ranks. Talk more on that momentarily, but these are the scholarship additions. But West Virginia does have some preferred walk-ons that I think will factor in this upcoming season. The ones that stand out to me, of course, is some ones that West Virginia brought in. Tyler Kane, a transfer linebacker from Navy, may get some reps at the linebacker position. We'll see. And then, of course, Luke Hamilton was an FCS All-American at the fullback position that West Virginia was able to bring in on a preferred walk-on. So just some of those that stand out to me off the top of my head, and there's even more. And like I said, West Virginia still has 2 scholarships remaining, so who knows if one of these preferred walk-ons could earn a scholarship in the near future. But as it stands right now, this is kind of the roster that we have, getting closer and closer to fall camp, and it's getting pretty much right near completion. As I scroll through here, the only player that West Virginia is awaiting that they know that they have signed on is true freshman wide receiver Traylon Ray, a member of this past 2023 football recruiting class. Other than that, all the transfers that West Virginia was able to get commitments and sign have been added to the roster, as have all of the true freshmen at this point, as you'll see them here listed on this roster. And like I said, some of these offensive line positions may change, defensive line positions may change once we get into fall camp and kind of learn where some of these new pieces will officially be playing. We'll continue to update this roster throughout the offseason here. And then, of course, as we get closer and closer to the start of the season, we'll do some depth chart updates as well, as we establish kind of a 2 deep at each one of these positions. But I think West Virginia really has added some good pieces to this roster, both with this freshman class that has came in, as well as this transfer class, especially as you see a lot of those additions in the secondary, and the most recent one since a talked to you guys and updated this roster last on a live stream as a highlight there. Anthony Wilson, the transfer safety from Georgia Southern, redshirt junior, 2 years of eligibility left. Could factor in at either one of the deep safety positions or even spear. Excellent tackler, over 100 plus tackles each of the past 2 seasons. So one of the highest tackling secondary players in all of college football. And I think he really does a good job, and it's improved in coverage every year as well. And I think he's going to be a great addition to this West Virginia defensive backfield, which the secondary, of course, is something that we really need to see improve this upcoming season. And we know that. And West Virginia's brought in great transfer pieces that can help there. You see Anthony Wilson, Keyshawn Cobb among the safeties, Beanie Bishop and Montre Miller among the corners, and all of those guys I think are really going to help improve this secondary. And of course, I haven't really added the specialists yet to this roster, but Neil Brown did reveal on a recent appearance, I believe on Sportsline, if I'm not mistaken, that Preston Fox was going to serve as the team's punt returner for the upcoming season. Felt like he had earned that job. And then I have also talked about Deshaun Polk. I think is going to be a great addition to the kick returner aspect for West Virginia. Something they're also looking to improve is their kick return game. And as I scroll up here, Deshaun Polk, the redshirt senior transfer from Kent State, same school as Montre Miller, the defensive back I just talked about, is going to be a great addition to help West Virginia special teams. So wanted to update the West Virginia recruiting and roster, on the football side. So despite the fact that the stream's main purpose was to kind of update the West Virginia basketball coaching staff, wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. But appreciate you guys that have tuned into this live. And if you're watching this on a playback, we appreciate you doing that as well. But whether you're watching it live or on that playback, hit a like button, drop a like on it, but get this thumbs up before you finish watching. It really helps this video's performance, future videos performances here on the channel. And if you're a WVU fan, be sure to subscribe to us here. Helps us and it helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And we'll continue to update, the WVU basketball roster as this offseason progresses. And, of course, WVU football as well, if they add any more transfers, or if that final edition Traylon Ray is added, which we do expect to be added by the time fall camp starts. We'll do another roster update here on the channel. So subscribe here if you haven't already. But appreciate everyone that tuned in here to this July 2nd CRW live stream, where we wanted to provide you guys an update on the WVU basketball coaching staff, and then, of course, some WVU football roster and recruiting updates as well. And like I said, going to try and do these at least once a week as much as possible, updating the offseason progression in both of these sports and any news topics that come along the way West Virginia related. So appreciate you guys tuning in this one. Looking forward to the next one here in the next week or so, and hopefully you guys were able to tune into that one live. If you didn't get a chance to tune into this one, you're listening on a playback. But either way, we appreciate you tuning in to the Country Roads webcast. And like I said, be sure subscribe to us if you haven't already. Follow us on social media at WVU Country Roads on Twitter, Country Roads Webcast on Facebook and Instagram. And we also, of course, do the CRW podcast and CRW Hoops podcast throughout basketball season that you can find on the audio side as well. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Just search Country Roads Webcast and you can subscribe to us there in addition to YouTube. But appreciate everyone that came in here and tuned in with us live. Looking forward to the next one as we continue to update both West Virginia basketball and West Virginia football here on the Country Roads webcast. But having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz. And until next time, let's go